Hi, my name is Bruce Starr. I'm a television and radio talk show host and producer. And today I'm very, very happy to be interviewing Elaine Rudner. Elaine is 88 years old. She lives in Hollywood, Florida. She's had an incredible life, very accomplished, and I'm honored to be interviewing her as part of my Legacy series. Elaine, please, tell me a little bit about you.
I'm Elaine Rudner. I'm 88 years old. I will be 89 in June. And I think I just wanted to tell things that my children may not remember about me. I would like things that my grandchildren should know. I can't write it all down. My hands don't work too well. It's difficult for me to do things. Couple of surgeries, not be able to walk. All of these things have suddenly focused at one particular time in my life. I'd like to be able to get up and run. I'd like to be able to walk. I'd like to be able to dance again, but I can't. And I have realized I've done a lot in my life, and I have changed professions 3 times. I've done fairly well, not financially, but I have done fairly well in all of them. I've lived in the same house for 51 years. I'm now in a retirement home, and I didn't think I would ever be in this kind of a place. And I'm in a very wonderful home, but it's not like being on your own.
Elaine, has anything interesting happened to you lately?
Something interesting that happened to me last week, I had a manicure, and the manicurist said to me, "You have beautiful nails." And I said, "I never had such gorgeous nails. I don't do anything. I don't cook. I don't shop. I don't garden. I don't do any of the things that I used to do. This is a different world. This is an entirely different life for me. I would like to be back in a classroom, I think. I would like to be lecturing. I didn't teach children. I was a college professor. And how did I get to do that? I somehow don't even think about it.
Tell me about your education career.
I graduated from a college in New York City. I grew up in New York City. I grew up in a 3rd floor, a walk-up tenement. Yiddish was my first language. I spoke almost no English until I went to public school when I was about somewhere between 6 and 7 years old. I was very short. I was in an Irish Catholic German neighborhood, the only Jewish kid for miles around. So I know what it is to be called all the names that there are. But I would answer back in German, and then they would leave me alone. My maiden name was Deutsch. Sprachen Sie Deutsch? Which means, do you speak German? And everybody would ask me that, and I would answer them in Yiddish, and they didn't know the difference half of the time.
What were your first memories in this life?
Aside from all those other problems of not being outside on the street, my sight was very poor. I didn't realize that, but I didn't know how to read. I was down in the street one day, and I was jumping rope with little girls. That's taking 2 ends of the rope and you jump in the middle. I don't know if kids jump rope anymore today. I don't think so. I think they're all on video games. But I was jumping rope, and I was wearing my glasses. Glasses? Oh, I was the first kid to wear glasses. I was 6 years old. I was the first kid in my little class to wear glasses. Well, I dropped my glasses, and I stepped on them, and my glasses broke, and my world broke at the same time, because when I came back upstairs to my 4th floor walk-up tenement, and my mother saw it, Mama cried. And when Papa came home from work, Papa cried more. It was the only time in my life that my father hit me. He couldn't afford to buy me another pair of glasses. And so I went back to school, and my glasses were taped with adhesive tape. I will never forget that. And in my will, I have left money to the Lighthouse for the Blind, for children, who don't have enough money to get glasses. But when I got back to school with my glasses in Scotch tape, I have begun to realize who it was that paid for my new pair of glasses. Mama came to school, and I think maybe the first grade teacher, Mrs. Eisner, spoke to my mother, and somehow, between them, they found enough money to buy me a new pair of glasses. You know, I'm 88 years old. I never learned to jump rope again. I never rode a bicycle. I never did any of the things that kids do because I was afraid I would break my glasses again. And even now at my age, I think about it and I realize how wonderful that first grade teacher was. And I knew her name. Her name was Mrs. Eisner. And I kept track of her and she kept track of me until I graduated high school. And then I kind of disappeared somewhere along the line. But I was the first person to do so many things in my family that nobody else did. And I guess part of that came from the fact that I was born the same day as Anne Frank. Anne Frank was born June 15th, 1929. I was born June 16th, 1929. She died at age 14, close to 15, in a concentration camp in Bergen-Belsen. I grew up here in the United States. And every Friday, I say Kaddish for her. I say the prayer for the dead for her. And I'm sure that there are millions of people who do it as well. But I do it for a special reason. And I sometimes have to explain to rabbis or to people who conduct the service that that's my world. And that if I had been somewhere else, if my parents had not come to this country, I wouldn't have survived. So I'm not a writer. I couldn't ever write it down, but I have taught X number of classes for every other kid to write it down. Write it down, honey, because nobody else is going to write it down for you. I went from teaching elementary school to becoming a social worker. I graduated from Hunter College in the year 1950. Can you believe how many years ago that was?
What happened after college?
I was 21 years old, and I didn't do such smart things because I was 21 on a Wednesday or something. I graduated from college on a Thursday, and I got married on a Sunday. Not so smart. He wasn't so smart. I wasn't so smart. But it lasted 20 years. But I'll tell you something interesting how we met. My first husband and I, my daughter's father. I was a very devout Judaic studies student. And in November 29th, 1947, Israel was first born. Actually, the state of Palestine was conceived. And the United Nations voted to admit it is, and to divide up the British area and to name the land. They were going to call it Israel. And November 29th, 1947, there we were. I was dancing a dance, in the snow at Times Square in New York City. And I held the hand of a young man who was dancing next to me. And I married him 2.5 years later. True story. He was a student, he was a college student, I was a college student. We were hundreds and hundreds of kids dancing in Times Square that night in the snow. So who would ever have envisioned that? I stayed in the Judaic studies field. I went back to graduate school 25 years after graduating from college. Graduated from college in New York City. I went to Hunter College, one of the best. And I guess I went because my sister had gone 7 years before. She was a chemistry major. And I knew that she couldn't do much with it. She became a research analytical chemist. She helped to discover the flint that goes into a Ronson lighter. But as a girl, as a woman, she couldn't do anything with her knowledge. She went to work for the Ronson family, for the Ronson area, and always wanted somebody to acknowledge that she was on the team that helped to develop that. You couldn't do things back in those days that women can do now. And so I made the decision that I would somehow teach a course much later on, that I would teach women what they can do now, they couldn't do back 1950s, 1960s, even in 1970s, you could not do. And I think I was the first woman to teach the course at Florida Atlantic University on women in every field. I taught women in Judaism, I taught women in music, women in chemistry, women in every field.
What would be your message to women?
So women can do almost anything they put their minds to. You don't have to graduate college and do nothing. My choices when I got out in 1950, my choices were you would become an elementary school teacher or a teacher. You could become a nurse, or you could go to work in Macy's or Bloomingdale's. That was it. You got married, you had your children, you learned how to play mahjong, you learned how to play bridge, and you stayed home. You didn't go to work. Husbands supported you. Unfortunately, in 1950, the Korean War broke out. So we were trapped for a number of years, and Donna was born 7 years later because my husband was recalled into service. He had been in the Navy, and he had been recalled into service. That's what happened for the Korean War. So you find a number of people in my kind of a field as such. So many women wanted to do things, but they couldn't. They stayed home. I didn't stay home. I became a very good teacher, people will say. There are people who meet me on a street or who see you somewhere, and they'll say that they took a class with me and they remember me. I wasn't a great cook. Donna, my daughter, will certainly tell you that. But I kind of made up for it in other ways. I made a great cup of coffee.
What did you do after that?
I just wanted women to do what I thought every woman should be able to do. And I made sure that I did that. I was at FAU for 12 years. I became a professor, and an adjunct professor, which is a very big title and very little pay. And when the university closed the small campus that I was in and moved up to Boca, I gave up the job simply because I couldn't handle the driving any longer. I did something very interesting. In if I can remember everything, I became a volunteer in the Israeli army. I spent 5 weeks in the Israeli army, and I packaged Uzi guns. I really did. I packaged Uzi guns, which are, my 4 weeks was in the actual Army Reserve, and then I had 1 week of traveling around. I hitched my way around Israel with another woman, put out the thumb, went from one end all the way down to Beersheba, came all the way back, never bothered. It was the most wonderful experience of my life. We were not afraid. We were two older women. I was already 50s, 60s. Never worried about it. You put out your thumb and I couldn't do it today. But we certainly did it then. But I have pictures of me in my little army outfit, my boots, and my living on the base on a cot, which I shared with Russian immigrants. And I packaged 14,632 left-handed parts to an Uzi gun.
Wow.
And somebody on the opposite side of the base packaged 14,632 right-handed parts to an Indian base. And Uzis are packaged in sawdust. I became allergic to the sawdust. So here was I, never allergic in my life, but I was allergic to the sawdust and the oil. They're packaged in it's like a machine oil. And I lost all the skin on my fingers. And my poor wrinkled hands never really grew back and still hurt in a certain degree. But they did marvelous things. And it was a wonderful experience in my life. The job that I had, I was a major fundraiser for Jewish Federation, and I was also a fundraiser for B'nai B'rith Women, which was a women's organization at that time. I don't know why they wanted me to stand up there and make everybody open up their checkbooks and write out the checkbook to a Jewish organization, but I seem to have been able to do it in those days. And I had 3 weeks vacation. You know, people have said, how did you spend 5 weeks in the middle of the summer in Israel? I had 3 weeks vacation, and I chose to do it that way. I was single. I was raring to go. I left my house. I left my cat. My son came and fed the cat, and away I went. I was never afraid. I just picked up and went and did all sorts of interesting, odd things throughout my life. But that was the most that I had ever done. And most memorable, I have pictures of me in my army outfit. You'd think it was hysterical to laugh at with my little cap. But everywhere we went, my friend and I went, and we hitched from one end to another, which is what you did in those old days. The thumb went out. People picked us up. Arabs picked us up. Israelis picked us up. We ate as we went. There was always something to buy. There was always falafel. I OD'd, I think, on falafel. I had more falafel than you can ever imagine. We went into the Arab sections. We went into Jaffa. We went into the Arab shuk, to the like a flea market. And I can still remember it. And I can taste it sometimes. I can think about it. If my daughter and I can go out and have falafel, I can close my eyes and believe that I'm still back in an Arab section. And I've been to Israel several other times. After that kind of a time, I did go back. I had an interesting experience of something I would never do again. I earned the right to be able to lead a group in Israel. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that the group that I was going to lead was going to leave me holding out and making sure that they all got up. I had 17 of the group, and 17 people I had to make sure got up in the morning and make sure that they checked out of their hotel, make sure that I had all the passports, getting from one part of the country to another. I will never do that again. I would say it's not worth a penny of what they give you to put through that mishigas. And then there was the time when this couple was, I'm waiting, and the bus has to leave at 9:30 because we have to be somewhere else. And they never came downstairs. They were eating breakfast. So I sent somebody inside, and they're not going to rush to come out. And I said, well, the bus is going to leave. And so I packed up, and away we went, and we left these two. I didn't live to hear the rest of it, for the rest of the trip. And I realized, of course, I never should have, but, oh, I was so mad. Most of the group said to me, you're right, absolutely right. But there were 2 or 3 who said, oh, you should have waited another half hour. I couldn't. We had appointments along the way. So I said, no, I'm never going to be a tour guide again. But that was my another experience. So you go through life with all kinds of interesting experiences, and then you listen to what other people will say.
Tell me about your second husband.
I came home from Israel. I was a walker. I was I had learned to square dance here in the United States as an out for the other 2 jobs I was doing. And I met another square dancer, a single man whose wife had passed away. And lo and behold, I married him. 6 years. I married him, let me see, about, 6 months later. I had been single for 17 years. Never in my life did I ever figure I was going to get married again. and I had to introduce him to my daughter. It was like having a 16-year-old that coming to meet Mama. I had to go to Atlanta with my boyfriend and introduce him to my daughter. And then I had to go somewhere else and introduce him to my son. And we had a small wedding 6 months later.
Was it a love relationship?
Absolutely. 22, the magnificent years of my life. We were soulmates from the day we met. We were soulmates till the day he died. And we square danced. I went to work and he went to play tennis. And then he went to play golf. And finally, I gave up. But I would probably have kept on working. I just didn't want to give it up. But I had 22 wonderful years. He was 92 when he died.
Wow.
I was 57 when I got married. And so 22 years later. And he loved my children, and they loved him. And we had this coincidence. His birthday was July 23rd, and my son's birthday was July 23rd. Where do you meet a man who's got the same birthday as your son? So these two were golfers. They were wonderful friends together. It's been an interesting life. It really has. I have gone on from FAU. I went over. When they closed, I had the wonderful experience of being asked to go to Nova Southeastern University. I had taught a number of kids. Did I ever tell you that in the middle I was teaching Sunday school? And after that I became a bar mitzvah teacher. I needed money. When you need money, you have either you go to work in McDonald's or you find another way to make a few bucks. And I was a good Hebrew student, so I became a bar mitzvah teacher. I was the first woman bar mitzvah teacher in South Florida. They had never met the likes of me. And 20 years later, my rabbi said to me, "You should have been a rabbi." I said, "In another lifetime, I really should have been." But there was nothing that I could have done in those days. But I continued teaching bar mitzvahs. And then much later on, I taught women and several men who had never been bar mitzvahed as they came through the Holocaust. And as people here, even in the States, being part of a group or part of a grouping that no longer believed in the rituals that go with Judaic studies. And many men had never been bar mitzvahed. And so I had about a 67-year-old man who was bar mitzvahed for the first time in his life. And then I had a 86-year-old who was a Holocaust survivor and had not ever been bar mitzvahed. And it was just, and my husband and I danced at his bar mitzvah. Those certain memories that you keep in the back of your minds, and you begin to wonder. You wonder why, and you wonder how, and why it is. And then you have your own children. I have a daughter who's a psychologist, of whom I'm very proud. Chose not to have any children, married. I would love to have had a couple of extra grandchildren to play around with. Then I have my son, who unfortunately died of a kidney failure. Kidney and diabetes, tough combination. We couldn't find anyone who was the right mix. I was too old, Donna was not the right kind, and he's gone 3.5 years. He was on a kidney transplant list, and you never get over losing a child. You never get older. He was 57 years old. You never get over losing a child. I have 2 grandchildren. I have a granddaughter of 19, freshman at college, and a grandson of 17. And I have a picture of them, and I'm the midget in the middle. They are like 2 giants next to me. And before I moved to where I am, I had lived in my house for over 50 years, and we sold. My daughter was able to sell the house almost immediately, in a very desirable neighborhood in downtown Hollywood. When you live in the same house for 50 years, and you're in the best neighborhood in town, it was an easy sell. And we sold the house to Russian family.